So I think this second link that I sent should be good here. So why don't we get started, because it's a little bit. So I'm Virginia. I am teaching at Miami University. Hello. So if you all would look at that record with you all, it has kind of some questions. So the first part we're going to do is name, role, institution. Why did you join, or what do you hope to get from this book? Role is I'm at Miami University in the Office of Community Engagement and Service. I decided to start this book club because I really wanted to read this book, and I thought it would be a good way to get some other people knowledge about it. Does anyone want to go next?
Hey folks, my name is Mindy. I am also a second-year master's student in the Student Affairs and Higher Education program at Miami University in Ohio. I'm currently doing my assistantship in the College of Education, Health, and Society, working on diversity initiatives. And I joined the book club, one, because Virginia is my roommate, and two, because I really wanted to get to meet more folks in the community, and I was really drawn to the book choice. And so I'm really excited to get to know you all and to see the conversations that we have.
Hi everyone, I guess I can go next. My name is Vang, and I work at Iowa State University. I'm finishing up my first year working post-grad school. I also did my Student Affairs Master's degree at Iowa State, but I'm originally from North Carolina, so moved here for grad school, decided, hey, there are no AAPIs, let me just stay and be the only one. But I joined the book club mainly because I miss grad school. So Mindy, right now, maybe you love grad school, but or you hate it, but once you get out, you're like, I never read anymore. So really working for this past year, I just wanted to read and be integrated back into research. And I do also want to add that I work in an academic college, so 95% of the time people don't understand student development, and they don't understand what I'm talking about because they're either faculty or academic advisors without student affairs background. So yeah, I'll just stop there.
I can go next. So my name is Danny, and I actually just graduated from the Ohio State University with Master's in Higher Education. I'm actually going to be working now at Augustana College, which is in Illinois. I'll be working there as Assistant Director of International Student Life. So one of the reasons that I joined this book club is, one, because Stephen pressured me to do it. But second, I did want to continue to be in the scholarly world by continuing to read up on different aspects of, especially about Asian Americans, just the API community in general, but also because there are a lot of Asians in Augustana that I'll be working with. I think it's important that I continue to read up on this. So I hope that as we go on through this book club, we can encourage each other and learn more from each other.
Okay, I can go. My name is Stephen Deaderick. I am going into my second year in the doctoral program at Ohio State. And I also have my assistantship in the Multicultural Center, working with our social justice engagement programs. I joined because I've been meaning to read this book for a long time, and so this will actually keep me on track for finishing it, so I appreciate that opportunity. And just in working with AAPI students. That's definitely a focus area of mine in working with students. So I just want to continue to get to know the issues that students face and that we face as higher education administrators.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Thach. I apologize that you really can't see me, I think you can hear me. But I am currently a first-year master's student at Miami University in their Student Affairs program as well, and I hold an assistantship with the graduate school, working primarily with international graduate students. And currently I am right now at RPI in New York with an internship. I am interested in reading and joining this book club because I saw this book on someone's bookshelf and I thought it was really cool and I meant to read it, and now this provides me with the opportunity to read it and engage with other folks. So, cool.
Told you, and I gave you a thumbs up, but wait, I think you can see it, so cool.
I can't hear what you're saying, Virginia.
So,
It's native with y'all, and I mean, it was a pretty easy read.
So I guess I will take over now because Virginia's mic is having some issues. So to begin with, first off, it's really nice to meet you all. I will do my best to remember everybody's names. I do have to admit that is a growing area for me. But just to begin, we had to read the introduction in chapter 1 today. I was curious, right off the bat, was there anything that really resonated with folks, any initial reactions? I know it was very much like an overview or an introduction, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So this really isn't about the book specifically, but I'm thinking about like who's even on this call. So I just jotted down each institution that everyone's at, and I think it's really interesting that we're all from the Midwest or working in the Midwest, living in the Midwest, because I was expecting like some California people and, you know, with their huge AAPI population, but I just think it's pretty interesting, especially as it relates back to the first chapter about, you know, AAPI administrators, graduate students. So I just want to point it out, like it's pretty awesome that, you know, it seems like this is a space that a lot of us here actually need to create.
I guess I can go. I think, and some of the prompting questions were like, what stood out to you and stuff like that. I think all three of those questions can kind of be answered in a little bit of the same way for me. When the chapter went over like a lot of the statistics and the numbers, and I think in thinking about being a student affairs professional especially, and being sometimes the only AAPI person on our campuses or one of few, that really resonated with me, and especially being biracial, like the importance of kind of coming out as Asian, for lack of a better term, which I have my own dissonance around what that means for me and my identity, but that's something I've always made a point of making sure students know that I can identify with them and that they can come to me with issues that they're having around being an API student. And so I just think it's the importance of even mentoring some of these students for the future of student affairs and higher education, as we have seen API KC grow at NASPA every year, and when we hear about what it was like even within the last 10 years, how much it's grown is really important. And so I think just remembering where we came from with that and helping it grow with ourselves.
I think going off on Stephen's point about being the only at your institution, there was something that I read. I don't remember if it was chapter 1 or the introduction, but it talked about how Asian Americans as a racialized group, how we're underrepresented. So it was like, and if you include that, we are senior affairs professionals. Like the power dynamics is that we're as senior affairs professionals, we're already a minority when it comes to power dynamics. So you add that we're people of color, we don't have power in that sense, and then you add that we are working in student affairs, which we know, we don't make the big decisions on our campuses. And you also add to like other social identities, like myself as an Asian American woman. Like I think the book says something about like a triple negative or something going against you at all times. So I just think it's fascinating that here we are wanting to make change, but the reality is that we are probably the least when it comes to policy change and whatnot. We're the least like empowered too, if that makes sense. I just thought the book really, really highlighted that.
Oh, sorry.
Go Dan.
Yeah, no, you go, Stephen.
No, you go. You go.
So I guess I was a little bit hesitant because the book is called Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in Higher Education, and I myself consider, so I'm international, right? So I don't really consider myself to be Asian American, and I wondered whether or not this book would be like particularly relevant to me, but it was good to see that there are many different authors included in this book, including both domestic and international people, and so that was really great. But even like as I'm hearing you guys speak about your own experience and your own thoughts, I think this will be actually pretty good for me to hear about more.
So I wanted to go off of something, thank you, Danny, that Doris said about, it was that line about like the triple minority or something, and how they called being a student affairs professional a minority category, or like a category that is oppressed in some way or does not have privilege. So I just wanted to see people's thoughts on that, because I've never really thought of that identity in terms of not having privilege versus, like, I guess they would compare it to faculty members or I don't know what other administrative positions. But yeah, I guess I'm just wondering people's thoughts, because I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I agree with that as a minority category.
So I think I really resonated with that statement because I do have a student affairs background, and I work in an academic college where, the deans of the college are like faculty. So I work specifically for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is like your biology, chemistry, journalism, everything kind of dumped together into this big college. So it really resonated with me because in my heart, mind, and soul, like everything I do is for the students. I'm advocating for the students. Students need that specifically because my role works specifically with advocating for students of color in my college. And what I see is that when you even look at, how much student affairs professionals get paid and how much they can make an impact or affect decisions when it comes to like policy specifically, because I work with faculty, and it's just like, yeah, I'm sitting here saying, yeah, student development, students need this, but sometimes the reality is, well, we don't have money to support that. Why do we need to do that specifically? So for me, it's challenging because, especially as one person who is like, I'm a one-person staff, and I have 1,000 students who I'm tasked to serve. Like, a lot of the decisions, especially around budgeting, especially around hiring, all these decisions are not in my hands because I am like 3 removed from the person who runs our college. So when it comes to like policy change and things like that, like I may say, here's what we need. I may have assessment. I may do everything right in the student affairs world. But what it comes down to is that, guess what? I'm not the director. I'm not the, the person who holds the power to make change. So my viewpoint is from a student affairs professional working with faculty, and that's just what I've observed.
Seems like we have a new member of the club. Ramona, do you want to introduce yourself and your institution and what you hope to get out of this by joining this?
Okay, there we go. It's running very slowly for me. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Somehow I've lost. Can somebody nod if you can hear me? Okay, I can't hear all of you. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm late. I got the times mixed up a little bit. My name is Ramona Gupta. I'm the coordinator of Asian American Cultural Affairs at Columbia College Chicago. We are a 4-year private arts and media college. And I'm just so excited because I've actually been meaning to read this book for a really long time and just gain more insight into Asian American and Pacific Islander student experiences on campuses and how we can help them more. And to be able to talk about all those things with colleagues who are doing similar work. So I'm really excited to be here, and thank you, and sorry for the interruption.
So mostly we were talking about the first 2 chapters and about how identities can be a triple negative, especially in the world we live in, based off social constructions, etc. So I think that there and Stephen, you made good points about kind of thinking about our own identities. So coming from California, I felt very supported in my identity, but then moving out of California, it was pretty eye-opening. And to read the statistics about like the occupations and how many people are this type of occupation and that what type of position was pretty eye-opening to see that we've been in this country, or our families have been here for how many years, yet there are so few high-ranking like senior student affairs officers or university presidents, things like that. There's one university president that I actually follow on Twitter, and he's actually pretty fun. He's the University of Cincinnati university president. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Yes, exactly. And just being able to really feel good about it. Like hopefully, like by reading this book, we'll be able to think about our own identities and move forward to make change on our campuses for our students to help them see other people that look like them. Those are a few more thoughts.
I wanted to also comment on a previous point that you made there about like how kind of the role as a student affairs practitioner can be an interesting one with an institution. So I also, my current GA-ship is within an academic college, and so, excuse me, I feel very similar tensions, but also in general, like, I think there's a lot of conversations about needing to what is seemingly almost justify our role as student affairs practitioners, especially in the like era of budget cuts, and like, are we kind of like the fluffy stuff, or do we really actually help student growth and promote student development, and really are an essential component to the student experience here at university? So I think I really resonate with that point, and specifically at Miami. I'm very fortunate that there are several individuals who identify as API within my program, but in terms of current staff and administration, I would say it's very limited outside of offices such as the international offices, or offices that would be, quote, deemed where you would typically find particular individuals. So outside the multicultural realm, it's also very rare. And so I really appreciated that thought, and I'm very much with Virginia in the sense that I don't think I've ever really been at a university where that representation has been very strong outside of individuals who worked in particular roles that had to deal with identity or international students.
I think another thing I was thinking of when I was reading chapter 1, when they give the statistics about, like, there were only in 2007, there were only 17 senior level administrators who identify as, AAPI, and I was even thinking of going to NASPA this past, back in New Orleans, and being at the, I don't know if you all were there, but at the awards ceremony where it was like, like 2 hours long of like giving awards and everything. But I remember thinking, I was like, wow, this must be it. Like, this must be all of the, or the majority of the Asian American Pacific Islander student affairs administrators, student affairs higher education faculty. Like, this must be it, like, in our entire country, because so many big names like Teranishi, and just so many other different scholars were there. I was like, this must be it. Like, if something happened to us in this room, like, we would all be gone. All the AAPI, student affairs faculty members would be gone because we're all here. And it's just fascinating that we can put us all in a room and then just know that that's almost it. Like, it's really fascinating to me.
I was also thinking about like
there's of like how many just professionals in general, and I was like 300. Like, that's not that many. Like, I feel like I've seen like almost half or more than half of them.
I thought that number was low as well, but I think this book was, and the data that was pulled was a while ago, so I think the number has increased exponentially, I hope, because their numbers in the book seem a bit low, in my opinion. But Danny, I think you were going to say something, so you can say it.
Oh, thanks. I was reading about the whole pipeline, especially from post-secondary education into higher education, of how many students are not really wanting to go into the educational field, rather into business or into STEM fields. And so, I mean, one of the recommendations, I think, might be, not remembering this, is, but like increasing that pipeline to education. But I feel like as a Korean, I think it's part of our culture to discourage certain fields, especially low-paying fields like education. and go into something that's more prestigious, like the STEM fields or whatever. And so how do we go about, I guess, talking to students and parents about this in terms of like, considering education as a legitimate field? And it's also a cultural thing. So do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a difficult thing to navigate of like, are we trying to change the culture by telling them, hey, education is something that you should consider more? Or, I don't know.
I definitely understand what you're saying, Danny, about the different fields that individuals go into. When I was reading that, I wasn't very surprised because I know how often we're pushed into like being those doctors or whatever from our parents and others around us. But one of the things I was thinking about as I was reading it was, has there ever been a study about people's happiness in their jobs and if they actually do something with the degrees that they actually are attaining? Because it's just a degree, and like, yeah, like we're getting something, and that's what someone probably has told us to go and pursue, but are we genuinely happy, and are we doing the things that we had sought out to do? I don't know. Those were the things I was thinking about.
So and also thinking too, going back to Danny sharing with us that he identifies as international and also Korean. I wonder, because the book is going to get into it, I wonder if those who are willing to share, if you can share what some of your identities that you identify with, specifically like which Asian American, Pacific Islander ethnic group you identify with, mainly because the book was talking about how we're so diverse and that it's so hard to have this monolithic viewpoint. So I wonder if that's something that you all be willing to share. And I say this because I identify as Hmong American, and it is in everything that I do. Like, it's my most salient identity. And it's just very reflective of why I'm doing this work. And so I wonder if those who are willing to share can share, what you identify with and how that has shaped, your experience and why you're even in this universe to begin with.
I can go. So I identify as Indian American, and my parents immigrated to the U.S. in the 60s. My siblings and I were all born here. I work at an institution with a very, very tiny Asian American student population, hovers around 3%. We don't have, we have a smattering of faculty and staff, but I'm the only one that does work that is specifically targeted toward Asian American students, or that has that in the title. We don't have Asian American studies here, so it's my Indian American identity. We don't have a lot of South Asian students at the college. But also just in general, I feel like I'm one of the only real advocates that students have here. And so it's, yeah, I think that kind of just says it, or at least says it enough for now, of why I'm drawn to the work.
So I identify as Vietnamese American. My parents came here in the 70s, and then I was born in California, so I am a Californian Asian. And more recently, I kind of feel like I identify more with just Asian American and not specifically Vietnamese American. Um, just because, I don't know, I'm not sure. Just things about, like, I identify as Vietnamese, but then there's always that question of like, are you Vietnamese enough, right? Or are you blank enough? So that goes through my head a lot. And student affairs, well, I really enjoyed being with people. And honestly, it was the student affairs professionals that I met that really got me into being passionate about. Um,
So I think I kind of get what you're saying there, Virginia. I kind of cut off for many parts of what you were saying, but I actually I identify as Korean, but I was actually born in Paraguay, which is a South American country. And so, as I grew up in Paraguay as a Korean, um, I would often talk with my Paraguayan friends, and they would oftentimes remind me that I'm not truly Paraguayan, even though I'm a Paraguayan citizen, as well as a Korean citizen. Um, and when I would go back to Korea, they would tell me I have a strange accent in my Korean language, and the way I think is a little different from a typical Korean as well. And so they would also tell me that I'm not Korean enough. And so for my not my entire life, but until recently, I guess, I've struggled a lot with who I am. Like, am I Korean enough? Am I Paraguayan enough? Who am I? And, in the end, for me, or so far for me, I've decided that I'm 100% Korean and I'm 100% Paraguayan. And I don't care what you say, like, this is who I am. And so, I wanted to just, speak to you about that and tell you about my experience and see if it could help you in the process too.
I can definitely also relate to that enough problem that multiple people have mentioned now. Like I said before, I'm biracial, so I'm half Chinese and half white. I also grew up in Southern California, where there is a much larger AAPI community, and where there are a lot more mixed Asian people especially. And so I grew up with that being the norm. And then when I got to college at a PWI, that was eye-opening. But my two mentors from college were both Asian American, and so I was fortunate with that. And then I remember going to my first NASPA and going to that APIKC meeting and feeling like that was home, and have gone ever since. And so just seeing the importance of doing work with this community, because I do have ties to that identity. But like I said before, also the coming out aspect of making sure people know that I identify in that way, which is interesting in different spaces, because I am fourth generation Chinese American, and so I have had students tell me that I'm not really Chinese because I don't know the language or because my parents did not immigrate here. And so navigating that has been interesting, and having conversations about what does racial identity really mean and how can one identify.
So I can also really resonate with this idea of like the struggles with constructing what my racial identity really means to me. So I identify as Taiwanese, but that's because I was raised in a Taiwanese family. I was actually born in China and raised there for a few years when I was very, very young, but because I'm adopted, like the actual geographical location in which I was born has very little influence, and actually the way that I construct my identity or the culture that I've really experienced growing up. And so I think growing up in a small white suburban town where for like probably the first 5 years of my life I was literally the only API student in the school, I think it really made me realize how different I was, but that was before I could actually name what my racial identity was. And so I was made to feel different without being able to name it until I went to university. And so I think I also really struggle with constructing what my racial identity really means to me because it's still a relatively new part of my journey. But I completely agree with this idea that I think it very much shapes every aspect and lens in which I view the world. But I think in terms of actually naming what that looks like, I'm still very much in that process. But I do know it very much informs my work, and I think it's become increasingly salient again, being in the Midwest, whereas I went to undergrad at University of Maryland College Park, and so demographically those are two very, very different schools, different locations, and so, yeah.
So, similar to everyone else, I also struggled growing up. I'm originally from Flint, Michigan, and so there wasn't very many, or even at all. I think there was maybe one other API identified family. The others, two others were API adoptees that were around in my school district and around in the area. So I felt very isolated as well and was struggling with grappling with what it meant to be different from my other peers until I went to Michigan State, and that was a complete culture shock because I felt like I was too overwhelmed. I didn't even know that there was different populations out there and different things and people that knew what I knew, and it was exciting to be a part of that community, but also very mind-opening as well. And so right now I'm very passionate about international students, and I think a lot of it stems from coming to understand what my parents had experienced. So they're first generation, so I'm second generation, and I identify as Chinese and Vietnamese. And so learning about my parents' struggles has helped me really become passionate about international students and what they're going through when they come to the United States. And so that really helps informs me about what I want to do, but I'm still grappling with this idea of like, what are my identities as well, and so yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Like I said, this first Google Hangout was kind of an intro testing out thing. So I'm glad it sort of worked. I know that my connection has been not very good, and I apologize for that. Does anyone have any last minute questions or kind of things that they're looking forward to throughout this book club? I know we all shared like what we hope to get out of it, and a lot of you all mentioned about finally getting around to reading this book. But is there any questions at this point or anything else?
I have a question. I'm curious for if you are either in grad school or you've been through grad school, I'm curious as to how much emphasis your program had on racial identity development, specifically around Asian American identity development. I am somewhat familiar with this book because we read maybe 2 chapters out of it for our student development theory class, and I also took a critical race theory in higher education course. So I also did some research and read some of it from this text as well. But I'm curious as to, are you even studying your own identity in your graduate programs?
So at Ohio State, that's like probably half of what we do. Is a lot of reflection papers, especially about our own identities first. And I don't like racial identity is probably one of the prime identities that we study about. But again, it's not limited to it. We, they encourage us to explore all of our identities, and so I don't know, Stephen, if you would agree, but I would say we're very much about studying our own identities and racial identities in higher education.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that the emphasis isn't necessarily on certain identities, so I wouldn't say we study Asian American identity development a lot, or but a lot of that self work. So it's kind of self-guided in terms of what you want to explore more if you're writing a paper for your diversity class or something. And that was my experience here and at UCLA for the master's program that I was in. Yeah, in my master's program, it was definitely like 1 day per identity, and so it kind of covered a range of racial identities and other identities too. But no, I think it would be interesting if we could offer more about specific identities, if classes could be created around just Asian American identity development. I think you could probably teach a whole class on that, and African American identity development and Native American identity development. There's a lot more that can be explored because I think it unfortunately hits the surface level because they want to cover everyone and not exclude anyone, and so you get a day per person, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I guess I was thinking more of like also like if you did read about Asian American identity development, which it seems like most of you have, like I want to know like which authors you were exposed to, because I know that with lots of grad programs, like there is a certain narrative that we get, right? Like everyone gets that green book, everyone reads that book about student development, but we really don't like get assigned like Asian American higher education scholars. Like I guess what I'm getting at is that like I didn't learn about Teranishi, I didn't learn about Musaeus, I didn't learn about all these people, scholars in our field, the very few, until when I researched it. So it's just like it's not. I guess what I'm saying is that when we study ourselves, like we aren't given the scholars. From my perceptions, I wasn't given the scholars who are actually doing the work. I got maybe a white scholar who wrote about the Asian American scholar doing the work. And so it's just really interesting to me like how we're even exposed to this work.
So, my graduate degree is not in higher ed. Oh wait, are we both, Virginia, are you trying to talk to right now? No, you're not. Okay. So yeah, my grad degree is in nonprofit and public administration, so we didn't cover racial identity like at all. But the way that I got into this work is because my background is in nonprofit administration and community organizing, and so I've always been immersed in racial justice work, and a lot of that work was in Asian American communities in Chicago, and then over the last few years, I've been more immersed in broader racial justice work, in coalition building, and so that's sort of where I get my information, right? And I think that is one of the reasons as well that I was really interested in this book club and in finally reading this book, is because a lot of times I feel like I'm missing some of that higher ed focused research and literature, so I feel like I'm able to serve my students well, but could do better if I had sort of the same thing that you're saying, right? Like, who are the people that are doing this writing and doing this research, so I can learn from them and not wonder and not replicate the same work or the same problems. But yeah, it's like totally self-directed. There's no, I don't have other support in the institution to do this work. And actually, I work for one of the few institutions that has an Asian American president. He started here 2 years ago, and he's Korean American. He's originally from Chicago, but came to us from Arizona State. But even though he's Asian American, there's not a whole lot of extra support for Asian American students or Asian American programming. We just got him after 2 years to vocally support, and this is just in front of a small group of students, of Asian American students, just got him to vocally support the creation of Asian American studies, and that doesn't even mean anything really. We'll see what we can do with that, but no.
I think similar to Danny's program, Miami University's program, is very self-reflective, and so I think Stephen also mentioned this, that you're doing the work yourself and you're looking it up, and so there are opportunities where you can find those authors, like Teranishi and Musaeus, but I think part of it is the faculty. We, at Miami at least, we don't have any faculty who identify as Asian Pacific Islander. So I think that's a big part of it for us. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, the other two Miami people.
I mean, I think I would certainly agree with that. We are a very self-reflective program, but it's interesting because you're naming these particular authors, and I actually haven't heard of them before, and that's just me being very transparent about it. I think as a program, we do a very good umbrella where we'll say, like, well, how has your racial identity influenced you? But they won't actually provide us with a tremendous amount of theory or developmental model to support that. It's very much about personal construction, which I think is incredibly powerful, but I think one of the places I am challenged in this program is that I don't have a lot of very concrete academic material to reference in terms of authors, models, and developmental theories. And I would actually say that, though, in my experience, I feel that our program tends to only talk about race, and even so in a very broad realm, and it's still very much, and I think it a lot has to do with the current political situation as well, very much is almost like a black and white dichotomy, which I think then makes it challenging for me as a student to, one, know the academic literature out there, but then two, really know how I fit into conversations around race. And then how do I support students around that who are probably also feeling like they have a say in the conversation because we are a racial minority, but then the focus and emphasis is not traditionally on individuals who seemingly fall out of the created binary of black and white, and then the spectrum in between kind of gets lost. So I agree with Virginia, but I do think I do think that is an area of growth, and I'm really excited to actually be exposed to these authors and to be able to actually read about API student experiences and identity through those lenses versus others.
Okay, one last question. I promise I'm not hogging. So how many of you all on this call want to stay in student affairs, and maybe how many of you may be thinking faculty route? I think for me, while I love being a practitioner, I think so critically and think so scholarly so much that I may possibly, want to join Stephen and do the PhD route maybe. But I was just wondering, like, long-term wise, like, I know most of you are in your master's program, but do you want to be, faculty in higher education?
I've been thinking about it more and more. I still consider myself a little bit of not a newbie in higher ed. I mean, I've been in higher ed now for about 6 years, student affairs for 4, but I find myself, so I love being a practitioner. I love working with students, right? Like, I feel like it's changed my entire life in so many good ways. But I find myself getting frustrated a lot of the time because I am doing that outside work, right? I'm doing racial justice work in the larger community. I read, I learn, and when I find that other folks aren't doing that, it makes me want to go sort of that more scholarly route. and think about how I can help bring other folks up to that. Well, that sounds really arrogant, and I don't mean it in an arrogant way. But I do feel like maybe just where I'm working, a lot of that sometimes just gets thrown by the wayside, the scholarly part of it. I would love to talk more if you are thinking about that, because I'm just starting to think about that and not really sure what I want to do or where I want to go with that. And it sounds like it would be really helpful to just kind of hash that out with other folks who are considering that. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, so I actually do not want to go to the faculty route, although I am in the PhD program. I definitely do want to end up in administration still, be a senior student affairs officer. In the back of my mind, like, yeah, I would consider teaching maybe and doing some research on the side, or maybe teach like one social justice class or something as a senior student affairs officer. That's mostly my plan, but I would definitely love to talk to you all about that process, or looking at programs and looking at faculty, like we've mentioned, is really important for the doctoral work, because then you can do the work that you want and make sure it aligns with their research interests. And so, yeah, that's an interesting question, though, and I think we need AAPI representation in both realms to be increased, in the faculty side and the administration side. So hopefully that can happen no matter what path people end up taking.
I want to thank everyone for sharing. That last question is actually very thought-provoking, but unfortunately we are running out of time, and I know we started late, so I apologize for cutting short. Maybe this is something we can continue next time. So I wanted to take a picture, like a screenshot, so I'm going to have everyone wave to the camera. Hold on, let me get my language. Everyone wave to the camera, and then...
I can't wave, but I'll talk.
Okay, well, yours is a picture.
Okay.
Keep talking again.
Oh, keep talking? Okay. Hello. Did it work? Did it work, Virginia?
I took pictures. Thanks, everyone. It's been fun. I'll be sending you an email shortly to talk about the next chapters, and then figuring out if this was an effective way of communicating. Someone else suggested a different website. So we'll see. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.